Welcome to Filling You In, a dental podcast with A Squared, where dentist entrepreneurs and spouses, Dr. Anushka Gaglani and Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj, welcome industry experts and innovators to explore trends in business practices, patient care, career development, and what it takes to be successful in dentistry.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Filling You In. I'm Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj.
And I'm Dr. Anushka Gaglani, collectively known as A Squared. If you own a dental practice, are you an entrepreneur or are you just self-employed? Our guest today, Eric Morin, has helped many dentists understand the difference and transform their practices into wealth-generating enterprises.
Eric is a business strategist, leadership consultant, author, Forbes speaker, dedicated to helping doctors move from the chair to the boardroom. As president of Tower Leadership, he's empowered thousands of professionals to scale their operations, build lasting wealth, and create a life of purpose and freedom. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eric.
I'm glad to be there. I need on my podcast, I need both of you to do the introduction because that was way better than I do. That was fantastic. Glad to be here. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Likewise, we mean every word of it. We can personally vouch because we're being coached by you as well. We'd like to dive in with our first question. We always like to start with learning a little bit about your background and career paths. How did you get first involved in dentistry and why?
You know, it's first all I'm going to say, Victoria said I'm going to send some questions over, and she said I'm going to send some questions over. I said I don't even want to know what they are, so ask away. This will be fun.
Great.
She put them in front of me, and she was like, and I said I don't need those. So we'll just talk. You know, I as an MBA, I've always loved business, and married a dentist, and she said start a dental practice with me, and I always say the best part of that is I didn't know what I didn't know, which was anything about dental business. And so we just went from zero to multi-doctor, multi-million-dollar practice quickly because I didn't know you weren't supposed to scale. Now, this was 2006, 2007. And so to me, I was like, this is how you get out of the dental chair, you add other doctors, you start to scale. And so when I walked into her office one day and I said, all right, now that we've got this maximized, let's go to the next location, And she looked at me and said, what are you thinking? She was like, I don't want any of that. So I started helping other doctors do it, grow their practices. And as we started growing their practices more and more, I had such a passion for it. I ended up coaching thousands and thousands of doctors at this point. And then at one point I went and got all my investment licenses because I was watching people taking money out of an asset doing 30% and putting it somewhere doing 5 or 6%. And I didn't understand that either. And I was like, there's got to be some great magic in the finance world that people are doing this. And I've let those lapse, but really understanding the business and financial world, I was able to sit down with doctors and say, all right, doc, what do you want? And then spend my career helping people get that. And by the way, there was nothing in that financial wand over there that was better than investing in their practice. And so I've spent my career doing that.
That's amazing. I think it takes a lot of, sometimes it takes a zoom out perspective, right? I think as dentists, we get really into the nitty gritty of the business. So it really helps to have the perspective of someone such as yourself who's been doing this for so long to say, this is simple, guys. Look at this right here. So we can definitely vouch for that.
You both definitely can vouch for that. Well, what amazing industry we are at this point. I mean, if you go back just a few, it's a few decades, and it's how much it's transformed even the last 3 or 4 years. And you two are the example of exactly that, about how you can create this. And I think that was the compelling thing for me was you've got this amazing asset that impacts so many people's lives. And if you actually invest in it and you create a business out of it, and instead of just passing it on and not doing anything with it, what can it do? And I love, because I love business, I love how the model has changed. I say this is like the golden time of dentistry. I mean, depending on how who you ask, I think this is a compelling, amazing time, and I love being part of this industry at this point. But the potential of a dental business at this point is greater than it's ever been, and I love that because it has the ability to impact so many people.
Yeah, I love that you said that. We hear so many dentists say the golden age of dentistry is over. And for us, we're like, it's just beginning. It's so exciting.
But if I asked my father, if I had said to him, what do you think about today versus your generation? I think people are nostalgic by nature. But I think we could point to so many reasons why right now is an amazing time in dentistry. And it really is. And the ability for people and how much the mindset, just not even the business model, but how much mindset has shifted, which is another podcast, but we could talk about how mindset affects trajectory, right? Because it really does. And how it's like that barrier no one thought could be broken. It's been broken so many times now that it's an assumption. So it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and there's actually a question coming up about that. But the next one, real quick, we said at the start that you help people understand the difference between self-employment and entrepreneurship. What are your key insights about that?
It's interesting when anyone can start a business. When we get these statistics, like 99% of businesses fail, and it's like, well, okay, yes, but are those really businesses? And we can take that apart. But I think when someone starts a dental practice, for instance, and they say, I'm a business owner, I kind of challenge that a little bit. If you're truly an entrepreneur, that means you're investing in scale. It means you're investing in leadership. It means you have a greater vision for your organization. It means you're thinking about the moving pieces and parts. You're thinking about strategy and tactics and the things that an entrepreneur thinks about. But being self-employed, just owning a business, well, I mean, anyone can do that. I mean, I can go on the website for my state right now and form an organization or corporation in probably about 20 minutes. And that's technically a business owner, but there's a gigantic distinction. And going back again to what our first comment, which is that this is such a beautiful time. Why? Because people aren't just business owners. They're entrepreneurs. And when you're an entrepreneur, you see a bigger vision for your corporation, for its outreach, for what it can do, what it can create, what it can build. And so when I look at something like that, I say, look, there's a lot of business owners in dental. There's a lot of them. But how many of them are truly entrepreneurs? Mm. And, in our own corporation, I've said years ago, I said, it's hard for me to create an entrepreneur. It is. It's a big lift. And it doesn't mean it can't be done, but would I rather put more energy into creating an entrepreneur or more energy into taking an entrepreneur and allowing them their trajectory to go tenfold? The outcome is much greater, and the likelihood of taking an entrepreneur and making that person more successful is more likely, I should say, than somebody who you're like, okay, let's talk about psychology, and I'm not a psychologist, and you're trying to get somebody over their core way of doing things. And years ago, I used to think everybody could be this visionary. I just thought everyone's a visionary because I am, and I thought we can all do this. And then I realized that's not true. I mean, some people just struggle with vision, and that's okay. But I think that when we look at true dental entrepreneurs, somebody who sees a greater vision, who wants to build something, who wants to scale, who realizes that they make way more impact out of the dental chair than in the dental chair, then that's just a different person. And there's not good or bad. I want to make sure I make that distinction. I'm not saying someone's a good person or bad person. We're talking business though, right? This is a business conversation. Mm-hmm. When we get into business conversation, I think some people, and we're seeing as the industry consolidates, and we'll see to the degree it does that, as we do this, we're going to see a lot of these self-employed people ultimately not be there, but dental entrepreneurs thrive. And whether that's good or bad is subjective.
Right on. I think you hit on a lot of good points there. Speaking of entrepreneurship, and I know you mentioned something about mindset too, Eric. The difference between knowledge and wisdom is application, right? There's a lot of people that have the knowledge, but you have to really go apply it in order to be able to teach others. What do you think are some maybe key mindsets? I know you're a Dan Sullivan fan as well, 10x easier than 2x, but what do you think there are some key mindset shifts that are obviously required to go from being a practice owner into being an entrepreneur and start working on the business versus in the business? How do you go from that to, leapfrogging your way into scaling a business?
Now that is like a 5-hour conversation, but I'll try to sum it up into a question. I think that, it's interesting. And I was just listening to, I think someone you had on your podcast, and he was talking about identity, and identity has become this thing that 5 years ago, people were not talking about identity, not to the degree they are now.
Right.
And you'll watch so many people, now really understand the best entrepreneurs, the people that are really moving the needle, understand, how, first of all, what identity means to their success and how hard it is to change it. And then also those things that we call upper limit problems, the things that ultimately self-sabotage. And I think that I've helped coach entrepreneurs in understanding those things and stopping them, like they'll bring themselves down or stop. So for instance, an example would be of a self-sabotaging belief would be, you're a younger doctor who's coming into a practice that's established and you hold yourself back. Maybe it's leadership or maybe it's skill set. Now, I'm not saying you should be overbearing. I'm just saying maybe you have skill sets you could bring to the table, but you don't. Why? Because you don't want to overshadow, right? And so that's ultimately what we call an upper limit problem. And I could talk about those all day long. And the reason I go to that complexity is to say that when we get into identity, and anyone listening to this podcast, if you haven't done your own identity work or started to do that, start doing it. Because the way you see yourself, the beliefs that ultimately you have, what you think you can scale, how you think you can scale, what do you think is possible, the way you wake up every day, the way you speak to people, your identity is everything. So for instance, I had a doctor not too long ago. He said, Eric, I want to get to 15 million. And he said, do you think I can do it? I said, well, business-wise, of course. Business-wise, it's not hard at all. I mean, I can show you exactly how to do it. The question will be, can you become a business owner versus a dentist? And that's going to be the hardest part of getting you there. And when you're stuck, some people love clinical dentistry, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love that. But we have to understand still there's a trade-off. Anytime we're in the chair, we're not growing our organization. And to the point where, remember, as a dentist, people are giving you a certain amount of esteem. And it isn't until we build our businesses so high that we're getting the same thing in the marketplace. And so there's this transitionary period where people are going from a clinician to an entrepreneur, that there's this gap and there's a mental gap. And so there's a lot of work around it. So I would just say that, people ask me sometimes, they'll say, Eric, give me the one book you read to help you get where you are. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's a career of reading. I don't know what to tell you. But I would say that people do need to search in their own identity and understand that people are talking about it more and more. It's a conversation that's happening of the top entrepreneurs and the top entrepreneurial coaches, because we start to realize it's our identity that's holding us back, and when we change our identity, it's the same reason why if I take someone doing $5 million in annual revenue and I put them in a room of people doing $50 million for a day, their business doubles almost immediately. And that phenomenon happens because of identity.
That's so true. Going from scaling from a clinician to CEO sounds super challenging, but it is actually simple in the sense that it is a decision you have to make and be comfortable with, right? So,
well, I've had doctors that I've coached that at $1 million, they said, Eric, I can't get out of the dental chair. I mean, I'm the only producer, which is fair. Then they got to $5 million and they were like, well, I mean, it would impact our profitability. Okay, it's fine. Then they got to $10 million. And I was like, why don't you get the deal? And they got to $15 million. And by the way, this isn't just one case study. Like I could give you so many of these, but I'm like, I could give you doctor after doctor after doctor that I've literally personally grown from over 1 million to 15 million. And yet getting them out of the chair sometimes is like, there's every excuse in the world. It is harder than people realize. And it's okay to realize that it's hard. And there's no shame in it, but to say it's not hard, it is hard. Or people would just get out of the dental chair. It really is hard, and only a select few actually do it.
Yeah, I think I think both of us relate to that a lot. It was kind of an identity crisis at first when we made the decision. I was like, wait a second, like what do I do? And when we finally pulled out, for about 2 weeks, I was twiddling my thumbs, saying, okay, now what? And then the schedule got full again with all this other stuff.
It gets full, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
I've had so many phone calls where doctors are like, okay, Eric, now what do I do? And I've had to coach them through that, but it's right. I mean, it's Parkinson's law. It's a hole. If there's a void, it will get filled.
Yep.
I mean, I don't care what it is in life. And we have to just make sure what's getting in that void is the right thing and not the wrong thing. Because people will try to take that time pretty quick. But it's like, ask a retired person, how much time they have, right? They don't have any time. They're so busy, right? So
Right.
it will be filled, and then it's crafting your schedule to become a great entrepreneur as a CEO. And that's another challenge, which is, I'm thinking while we're talking, I'm like, the amount of people that actually make the jump, it's not as many as people think. it really is a challenging, who get completely out of the dental chair. That, I mean, most of them are staying their hands somewhere in there 1 day, 2 day. And so, because it is a challenge. And the question is, if we know economically it doesn't make sense, and your organization's big enough to not need you from a production standpoint, then why are you there? And that piece is challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a great point. So Eric, you've helped practices grow by 30% or more annually, while many settle for 8%. What are some of the moves most doctors overlook that can lead to a big jump in growth?
Most coaching is linear and tactical. I would say, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, that you asked this question. I was like, why aren't people doing the same thing? And I thought to myself, well, it's because of tactical moves. Most of consulting is very tactical. We're going to improve your hygiene. We're going to find some efficiencies here. We're going to try to get case acceptance from 40 to 46 or whatever. Those are very linear moves. Linear moves are so important. I mean, you have to have them, right? That's the X's and O's of any business, your revenue cycle management and all those types of things. I mean, you of course it is. And all those things are important. But what happens is strategically, because one of my gifts, I mean, we all have our own gifts, but strategy is one of my skill sets, and being able to see the holes. And what we don't realize is that we have exponential moves that we can make, moves that are, so let's say linear is doing the same thing better. Exponential is doing it different. And that's a key distinction between the two. And so as we're making exponential moves in a practice, then we have to think about the things that triple our growth, that double it in a year, those key moves. And not a lot of people can spend time in that zone to really talk about what would double the practice in 12 months. And usually there are certain key limiting factors in called constraints. And if we understand those constraints and we understand those key moves, now some of them can be kind of somewhere in between linear and exponential. But I mean, I just talked to a doctor the other day he was probably, I want to say was at like 4 million. And we did some math and I said, okay, he's on pace he actually was on pace for 5.2. He didn't know, but he was, he was doing well. And I was having a conversation with him, and I said, somebody asked me to talk to him, and I was having this conversation with him, great guy. And I said, and I basically made one move. I said, dude, I said, do this. So I said, if you go back and you make this one move in your practice, and we would do some calculations together, your EBITDA will grow $600,000 just by this one move. And of course, at 7 multiple, that's a $4.2 million valuation move. And so there's not a lot of people talking about those moves. And so we're spending so much time in tactical, and I think there are levels of sophistication in everything, in dentistry and consulting and advisory and taxes and everything. There's levels. And so I would say that we all need to hit the X's and O's. And so go back to Dan Sullivan again, 2X versus 10X, right? The only thing that Dan Sullivan, I'll push back a little bit, is there's nothing wrong with I think organizations have to think 2X as well. Yeah. I think organizations have to have X's and O's. So I don't agree that we can't have 2X thinking. That's actually not true. In fact, I want the majority of the organization thinking 2X. Mm-hmm. But then I need some people thinking exponential. Now, here's the key about exponential, and this is what if you know what those exponential moves are and you go to apply them, if you study business strategy will tell you that exponential moves take time. And because they take time to implement, management often caves on them. It goes back to the core way of doing things, which is 2X, because those moves were either difficult or they had a lot of pushback, or they didn't see how to do it, or they didn't go get the advisors around them to make sure that stuff happens. So there are moves that most practices, I knock on wood, but it's hard to say. I mean, it's one of those things we got to be careful to say, but unless you're at a very large size with very limited constraints. When I say limited, I mean a lot of constraints. I don't mean less constraints. Unless you're in that position, 30% should be your goal. 30% should be your goal. And most practices can actually go faster than that. They can. So I would say that most practices, now look, I get it. If you're like, hey, Eric, we're $42 million and 30% might be tough. I get that. But most practices that listening to this podcast can absolutely should be looking at how could we grow 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50% in a very limited period of time. The average client at Tower grows, average 30%. And then there's of course people that are growing crazy numbers. And then some people don't implement, of course, but to say that most people aren't hitting those exponential moves.
No, that you hit on so many good points here too. This topic of linear versus exponential is incredible. One of the first things Anushka and I did a couple months ago after we had one of the coaching sessions with you was sat down with our leadership team, wrote down a bunch of examples and had them point out, tell us what this move is. Is this linear? Is this exponential? And they got a lot of value out of this, Eric. So thank you for actually, talking about that in depth. Speaking of exponential, I think private equity folks have been great at making some exponential moves, right? That's why they can grow 3 to 5x in a 5-year hold period. What should dentists understand about maximizing the value of their practice, whether they want to sell now or not sell now?
I know I give long-winded responses because I love this.
It's great.
So there's a Harvard, an HBR article that came out last month. And as a business nerd, as I am, as soon as the day it comes, I read through it really quickly. And so there's an article about the organization that owns Anytime Fitness, and they've become now the largest gym owner in the world. And when they were as a gym owner, they had one mission, and their mission was that you had to that they wanted to improve morale. That was the mission. Why do we exist, right? The why do we exist is to actually improve morale. And so they not only wrote their own manifesto, but if you wanted to invest in their company, you had to write your own manifesto as well. They had investors write a manifesto and give it to them on their beliefs and philosophies and core values to decide whether they would take their money. Really interesting. And everything they've done has been around that. In fact, they changed the whole gym, the whole atmosphere, because they looked at these big box gyms. They looked at there was no community. They looked at these contracts. I mean, they really, really, truly disrupted the gym industry and the way we saw it. And so why do I give that? And so they Harvard probably puts 4 or 5 pages around, maybe it's 6 or 7, about why their strategy worked and why they're the largest gym in the world now. And why do I go into that conversation to answer your question? Most organizations don't ask why they exist. And I know that sounds like a little fluffy. I know it does. But the thing is, people want to buy an organization that's a true organization, even if they're going to sell it, or even if they're going to build it to create something to last. We ended up in a 5, 7, 10-year period where everybody was like, well, if we put a bunch of garbage together and try to sell it before anyone figures out that there's, stuff in the garage, then maybe we'll, it's just that stuff was really tough. But the truth is that there was a lot of money lost. There was a lot of mistakes made. And so when we look at it now, it's like, people want to buy great organizations. They want to buy leadership. They want to buy something that's built to last. They want to build something that they want. I mean, even if you go in simple things like a Shark Tank episode, right? You'll hear they want to find the conviction of the owner, and all these things matter. So I give you a multi-billion-dollar example, and I can give you a Shark Tank example. Why do we exist? That's like a Patrick Lencioni. Like, why does their organization exist? Who does it serve? And I'm not talking about some generic, we work to serve the greater Tampa Bay area in patient care, like not that stuff, but like real, like, why am I here? Why does this organization, if you're going to build a great organization, you have to attract great people. And that's one thing in my career that I've had the blessing and honor to work with some of the most talented, wealthy people that just people that are worth crazy amounts of wealth. And most of them are just great people. It's hard to build something great unless you're a great person. And great people who are trying to build something, who know why they exist, attract money, they attract talent, they attract resources. And I think that's a cool, yes, we can say, well, that turns into a platform and we scale and we have, these systems and all the other stuff we can talk about, management and all the other things. But understand that even though that stuff sounds a little fluffy, it's actually, that's why I was giving that example. I mean, this is the largest gym in the world now, who started off with a question, like, could we improve morale of people across the world? And while that sounds simple and maybe idealistic, and I'll admit that I'm idealist and an optimist, but I would say that when we look at something like that, we have to understand that you have to know why your organization exists. Eventually, you're going to be looking across the table at somebody, and you're going to be talking about your organization. And I hope you have conviction in that conversation versus, I don't know, we just show up and we work. Like, I mean, so people, whether they want to acquire it, they want to merge it, whatever, people want to be part of something. And I truly believe that. And it's worth way more money when you actually have something of value.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. We went to Australia recently and I saw an Anytime Fitness and I was actually surprised. I didn't realize that they were that big, but that definitely tracks. And then the purpose, right? Like you said, it's kind of like manifestation, but making sure that we have a purpose behind it that's beyond money. Money is a result of that.
It's a lagging indicator. The money comes. Yeah. We don't always, like, the science in our brains, we're like, okay, just give me the P&L. Tell me what's the profit look like. But if you go back about 10 foot from me right now, I've got an article that was, it's a McKinsey study. And I go back to this McKinsey study over and over again, which, McKinsey, which one of the top consulting firms in the world, did a study over 1,000 different companies, over 100 countries, millions of employees. And they wanted to find out the number one thing that leads to growth and profitability in any organization, any industry. They wanted to know. And they thought maybe it was just leadership, maybe it was finance, maybe it was training. And they found it was direction. When people had a purpose, when they knew why they were there and how it led to their career, it impacted profitability, it impacted ultimately growth, it impacted trajectory. And those are the things the fluffy stuff that the CFO doesn't want to talk about, but that stuff, it matters to people. And, like I said, I know I'm getting a little idealistic here on the podcast, but it is true. And this stuff does matter. And I think that when we start thinking about organizations, I was just having a conversation today with our operations director and just the exact same conviction. I was like, the energy that you have when you're building something of value and importance, when I say value, valuable in people's lives and important, is a different energy than a taker who's just trying to put together a bunch of garbage and not trying to impact anyone and hoping that nobody finds out that it's a mess. That's a different energy. One is an energy that you can lift your head up and feel proud of. And so, that's the one I would chase.
I love that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think you had summarized something about money really well a couple months ago when you said money is a magnifier, right? Money, if you're a nice person, money should make you great. If you're a jerk, you become a bigger jerk when you have a lot of money, right? So that always resonates too.
It's so true. It just is. I mean, I found this over my career. I'm like, oh, okay, he was always like that, I mean, but it is. I mean, you both know so many incredible wealthy people that are just amazing people, right? We all do. And so it's, if you are that person, but if you're the person who's like, fine, now I don't care about anybody anymore and I don't need their opinions, it's like you start to magnify that too. And
right on.
The thing is, you can do both, and that's you can be a great person and attract amazing people and create a tremendous amount of wealth and impact. And I would argue the best people do.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. So what does real freedom look like for a dentist, and what's the first step to achieving it?
It's a question that I have since I came into this industry. I right away was like, get out of the dental chair. This was like 20 years ago. I was like, just get out of the dental chair. And, I'll tell a story. There was a doctor, this is probably one of the most impactful people early on in my career. I had a doctor come to me and I had a bank referrer. She had one practice that was doing really well, very successful. And the other one was failing, like almost, and she had a newborn at home. So it was like, and she had nowhere to go. The bank's like, hey, this is not our favorite situation and we don't know where to go. So they called me up and I asked the doctor then, I said, what do you want, out of life? She goes, I want to raise my child And, I don't want to have to think about the business every day or be there every day. And I don't want to be in the clinics. And I tell that story, she went on, by the way, to turn around that second location, add a third location. And I just saw her post. I actually spoke to her about a week ago, and I saw her post on Facebook with her child, who is much bigger now. And it's just such a beautiful thing. Business is an amazing tool. And go back to if you can inspire people, if people want to follow you, if you created something amazing, you bring in strong leadership. And I don't think people, which is a whole nother conversation, invest in leadership the way they need to. They aren't looking at the percentage that they're spending in executive management, but it's a different conversation. But I will say that if people look at what is the life that I want and really truly get keyed in on that, a dental practice can absolutely give you that, whether it's not being in the clinic at all, whether it's working 2 days a month, whether it's working 3 days a week clinically, and whatever it is, the practice is the ability to do that. I had a doctor who has become a friend, an amazing gentleman, and he was about to sell his practice. His EBITDA was about $4 million, so very strong practice. And I did the math on selling the practice, and then we paid the broker and paid the taxes and paid everything. I said, okay, this is what you got left. And he was like, oh. And then I said, okay, but if we keep it, and I said, you got $4 million EBITDA. Okay, let's put $1 million into an executive team. Mm-hmm. I mean, you still wind up so much better, and you still have your business, and it continues to grow. Your asset continues to climb. Your income continues to climb. And you've got talented people. And so no matter where you are, I mean, I always tell people there's 3 reasons to grow a business: income, revenue, or valuation. Now, we always earn a little bit of all 3, but there's usually one key driver. Revenue, one of the main reasons you increase revenue is to buy people. What I mean by that is to scale, to be able to buy other, to invest. I should say invest instead of buy. Invest in talent, invest in an executive team, invest in other doctors. And that's why we grow our revenues, because we can scale. Mm-hmm. The more we scale, the more we can pull back from the dental chair, and the more that we can spend time doing the things we love. I think that's different for everybody. I think that if I'm 2-3 days away from work, I start to go insane. I mean, I love what I do. I was telling someone this morning, I was like, I have no desire to sit around and retire, so to speak. For some people, it's, hey, Eric, I want to be on my boat 2 weeks out of the month. Hey, that's okay too. I think that you can do both. So I think freedom is an individual thing. I think that what a person considers freedom is different. Now, I think that there's a confusion where people think, well, if I sell it, then I won't have any stress. That's not true. That's not true. And in fact, I'll tell you, people have to be careful. Actually, I have a book coming out. I'm going to talk about all the numbers around selling and keeping. But I was sitting at the top of a mountain. By the way, that sounds like the beginning of like some Buddhist story, but it's not. I was sitting on the top of a mountain. I was going skiing. I sat there one day. It was me and actually it was two other dentists, and we were sitting there with this gentleman. And you could tell he was just sad in his face. And I said, started talking to him. He goes, I went from the most important person in the world to no one caring about me at all. Mm. And by the way, I'm not telling people to keep or not keep. That's not the point of this conversation. But the point is, freedom looks different for different people. And that's the point of my comment, is that he didn't know what freedom looked like. And he just thought, well, if I get a check, then I could sell the top of the mountain and life will be good. And he didn't really do some valuation of what that means. And so I believe that our organizations can impact so many people and you can still get the freedom. I think the misconception is I have to sell it to get freedom. Now, some people might sell and that's okay, but I'm saying the idea to sell to get freedom, I think is a mistake. I think you invest inside your organization to get freedom. That's what gives you freedom, not actually disposing of the asset.
I love how you answered that. I think one of the things Anushka and I realized too is scaling is hard, but not scaling is hard too, right? So you have to pick your heart at the end of the day. And I love how you framed that answer. It's really good. Eric, how can listeners plug into Tower Leadership work with your team?
Dental Wealth Podcast is a great way to listen to my philosophies personally. If you want to listen to my own philosophies and say, I want to hear what this guy has to say, Financial Evolution is a book that I wrote really, truly about my own philosophies as well, which is a great book to pick up, and Dental Wealth as well. And then, you can reach out to our team. I think people get concerned about having a conversation. Nobody wants to get, anyone pushing them in a corner, but I think that there's ways to, I would talk to our team. We have a lot of assets online. We're on YouTube, we're on podcasts, you can hear a lot about our philosophy, but I think also, reach out to our team and have a conversation. I think that this is a time in dentistry where you want to communicate. The people that I know that grow the most in my career ask the most questions. There is a correlation between growth and humility and asking questions. And the people who ask questions, have a conversation with one of our team members and just say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on. What are your thoughts? That doesn't mean no one's going to pressure you to move forward, but I do think you should have a conversation. And if it's not us, somebody else, because I think this is a great time in dentistry to get plugged in there are great people that are helping people. And I think you need to be plugged into a conversation that really suits your desires. And if you're looking to grow and expand and impact people and do cool things, we love the opportunity. Absolutely.
Love it. It's great. I've actually read both your books, Eric, and there's a lot of gold in both of them. So
I appreciate that. Now, see, I spoke like 90% of the time, so now I'm going to have you both on my podcast, and then you guys get to speak 90% of the time.
You're the one with the knowledge. I think this is the right direction.
I appreciate this. This is I think right before we went on air, I said to you both, this is my favorite medium of anything. I love being on stage. I love a lot of the work we do, but something about a podcast just lets you have a candid conversation. That's why I said, I don't put questions in front of me, and I always, for me personally, it's let's just have a conversation about what's going on. It is an amazing time, and anyone who I'm so glad you created this podcast. You two are two of the most dynamic people in this entire industry. I don't say that you guys are, and people know who you are and what you're doing. And, I would tell people listening to this podcast, share it with a friend, share it with another person. You'd be surprised how much that impacts other people. Share the podcast, let people know, because you two are just doing such amazing things. And I am honored to be on this podcast and having this conversation with the both of you. It's the highlight of for me. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
No, thank you. Honestly, it means a lot that you've taken the time as well. But before we wrap up, we're going to do a quick lightning round.
All right, let's do it.
All right. What was your last impulse buy?
Oh God. It wasn't for me. It was a Mother's Day gift for my fiance. It was a Cartier bracelet.
Ooh, which one?
The nail one. I don't know the name of them.
Just on Clue. Good choice.
Yeah, the one's she got little diamonds in it or whatever. Yeah, that was my last impulse buy. It was a Mother's Day. We were out in Barbados. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. What are the least likely 3 words someone would use to describe you?
Egotistical, selfish, and arrogant.
Yeah, I think in the short amount of time we've known you, we can probably vouch for that.
Yes.
And what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh gosh, this is embarrassing. I didn't know this was going well. It would probably I know this is bad, but it's like one day I killed it. I think I thought I killed it. I didn't. But it'd probably be like Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. For some reason, I would kill that song.
It's a great choice. Great choice. Eric, you mentioned earlier you really like the podcast format. I think we can say, both of us, that even seeing you in person speak is just so motivating and inspiring. I think you are an amazing speaker on both platforms. And we are it's actually our honor to have you on today. So thank you so much for being with us.
Really is. And you've given us so much value in the short time we've known you, and everybody should get a piece of you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I'm Dr. Anushka Gaglani.
I'm Dr. Abhishek Nagaraj. Thanks for checking out today's show, and we hope you can join us again next time.
Thanks for watching this episode of Filling You In, where we uncover the insights, trends, and stories shaping the dental industry. If you like this podcast, please share it on your social channels and visit Aereo Dental Group on LinkedIn or on Instagram @Aereo Dental Group. You can also subscribe to the series and check out all of our episodes on this YouTube channel or at aereodental.com/podcast. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and let's keep elevating the dental field together.